talk about the 1919 revolution for me is to talk about revolution of hearts, minds, and creativity. This description reflects what happened or took place at that time. And as we look back 100 years to what was done, realized, and achieved with the 1919 revolution, by it, and because of it, for a few years leading up to it, and definitely for many years after the revolution, it shaped what has become known as the golden years of Egyptian literature and arts. And here, let me describe my role in the coming 15-20 minutes or so. I'm not a historian. I have always been, and try to be a storyteller who may talk about the trees, yes, talk about the trees, and can also see the forest. And one who at the same time may describe the forest and also recognize the trees, each one of them, or each one by one. So to make it more perspective to see what we are going to expect from my presentation, I'm talking, as I described to many people yesterday, the organizers, I'm going to talk about the cultural genealogy of 1919, as we can say it, if cultural DNA, and see how it is developed somehow, who are these people, component of that DNA, and what kind of work was done, and after 100 years, what of these DNA components you may see or not see if you want to reflect on what's going on now or not going on now. As is often the case, great events like 1919 revolution, it is understandable to ask, what is the role of an individual, the individual leader, in this case Saad Zaghloul, as well as the role of the masses in shaping this great happening. We are dealing with a wide popular movement that lasted for almost 4 years, and with a leadership who was able to catch that historical moment, and to lead to a popular movement. It is worth to mention here that Imam Muhammad Abdu and Gamal Din Afghani contributed in shaping Saad Zaghloul political personality and knowledge. The Imam also, Imam Muhammad Abdu, picked Saad to work with him as a literary editor in Al-Waqa'a al-Masriya. Imam Abdu, by the way, died in 1905 at the age of 56. Al-Afghani died in 1857 at the age of 59. And just to put in a perspective, Saad Zaghloul was born in 1857. At the time of the 1919 revolution, he was 62. He died in 1927 at the age of 70. One of the figures who may look, when we look back 100 years, we can see him, Tawfiq Hakim, the playwright and novelist who was born in Alexandria in 1898. In 1919, he was 21 years old. I will try to make everyone how old he was at that age, at 1919, sorry. He wrote his novel Audat al-Ruh, Return of the Spirit, in 1927, which means after 8 years, he was 29 years old. While living in Paris, inspired by the revolution, it tells the story of Mohsen and his family living in the days that led up to the revolution. Al-Hakim, Tawfiq al-Hakim, was a pioneer in opening new horizons and paving new roads in Arabic literature and writings in general. And I have to say that it was considered what Tawfiq Hakim did in writing, a revolution in writing, especially when this fight was going on between Fusha and the Ammiya, and he was able to make this mixed language or third language or fourth language, whatever you can call it, but it was something that reached the heart of the people. And people, regular people, young people were able to read when they were used to read Manfaloti and other writers, and start to read Tawfiq Hakim. Hakim, as we said, he was especially in the use of language. When I say simple language, when I say always, I define simple, good language or like communicable language, which is like I said, it is the use of simple, direct, and clear language. Simple, direct, clear language. He also handled edgy topics and confronted taboo subjects in 30s and forward. I mean, Tawfiq Hakim from 30s already was facing many things that people were afraid or not ready to challenge. It has been noted that Nasser liked this novel, The Return of the Spirit, and which he said inspired him and the free officer who led the July 52 revolution, one that overthrew the monarchy and ended the British occupation. Nasser became the second president in 1954 and remained president until his death in 1970 when he was 52 years old. I'm just even giving sometimes other ages just to compare with other presidents and how long they last. The Nasser era and what happened to the intellectuals and writers is well worth a study and analysis. To know more about how Nasser and his men, and I expression this, the president and his men, in general saw and dealt with writers and so on. 4 years after Nasser's death, in 1974, Al-Hakim published Awdat al-Wa'i, The Return of Consciousness. I mean, he's playing with the same words, Awdat al-Ruh, and now he's saying Awdat al-Wa'i. A non-fiction book in which he criticized Nasser era. Al-Hakim died in 1987 at the age of 89. Two artists who became important, prominent, and influential because of 1919 revolution, i.e., that is to say, who inspired and was inspiring, are Mahmoud Mukhtar and composer and singer Said Darwish. The sculptor Mahmoud Mukhtar, who was born in 1891, was 20 years old in 1919. He died in 1934 when he was 43. Mukhtar for Egyptians and the 1919 revolution is synonymous with his statue of Egypt's Renaissance, Nahdat Masr. The idea and the sculpting began in 1917 and completed in 1988. When I said completed, prominently located at Midan al-Mahatta, or Midan Bab al-Hadid, Cairo, which became after that Midan Ramses. And that station in front of the main train station. In 1955, the statue, Nahdat Masr, 1955, was moved to the current location, which is Nahda Square in front of Cairo University, Nahdat Masr. The statue personified Mukhtar's creativity and hard effort to be a symbol of Egyptian identity and awakening. What was also noticed in the case of Nahdat Masr and the statue and the building and the transfer and all these things, that there was a massive public participation in fundraising the statue. I mean, it's not a matter of how much they are paying, but people like even piasters, Egyptian piasters were paying just to be ready to see that statue is realized and become part of their life. And to be If anybody is interested to know more about this Mukhtar life and achievement and these details, Ahmad Abu Ghazi and his father Badruddin Abu Ghazi, they did a lot of studies because of their relation to Mahmoud Mukhtar, and they have a lot of photos and pictures and letters, even contribution of the people. It was somehow recorded, and all these things is available or kind of collected by Ahmad Abu Ghazi, who was former Minister of Culture. Naguib Mahfouz. I mean, the whole presentation can be about Naguib Mahfouz, but anyway, just like to give him some few words, because I had the luck and the pleasure and the honor to be with him for years and know how this guy not just right and how he think and how he behave and how to do anything in relation to life. He was born in 1911, and he was 7 years old in 1919. 7 years old because he was born in December anyway. So it's like, this is March. That's why I'm saying 7, just for people making always calculations, say, no, it's wrong, it's 8 years. This novelist and Nobel Prize laureate of 1988 said repeatedly, both in public and in private, that 1919, we used to say usually 1919, we didn't, sometimes we say Thawrat 19, sometimes we say 19, Thawrat 19. It's not 1919, Thawrat 19. Said repeatedly and publicly that 1919 is a revolution we admired and we believed in it. And this is like variation of saying, آمنا بيها وأشعل حماسنا أو أشعل وطنيتنا. In different expression you can say. In 1956, Naguib Mahfouz published Palace Walk, بين القصرين, the first part of his Cairo trilogy, in which he described Egypt and Egyptians at the time of the revolution. In the early years of his career, Mahfouz also reviewed Abbas al-Aqad books about Saad Zaghlul. In 1983, there is a music coming up. Sorry. Okay, it's fine. In 1983, Mahfouz published his novel Amam al-Arsh, Before the Throne, the dialogue among the rulers, Hawar ma bayn al-Hukam, in which he revisits, in this book, Mahfouz revisits history and those who ruled Egypt till Sadat, including Saad Zaghlul and Mustafa al-Nahas, Wafd leaders. Mahfouz died in 2006 at the age of 94. Said Darwish. The composer Said Darwish was born in 1892. In 1919, going back to this, how old he was at that time, he was 27 years old. He died in 1923 at the age of 31. I mean, what we know about this guy, this talent, is this genius, as I call it all the time, that within those 4 or 5 years, which is his top years of creation or creativity, more than almost 200 operettes and different compositions he made, and he stay in our memory or DNA, cultural DNA, for years and years and years. And he died in age of 31. As I said, Mukhtar died in age of 43. What Said Darwish left behind in this short period of time is beyond imagination, in both quantity and quality. He revolutionized and popularized song, music, and lyrics His songs still resonate after all these decades, all over Egypt and elsewhere. Even in Tahrir 2011, we were, all of us, we heard these songs, and still up to this moment, these songs can move any or shake or shock any group of people and make them feel they want to do something. Sheikh Darwish, as we always, he was called at that time, Ibn Iskandariya, and the hundreds of compositions that he left are endless source of joy and deep understanding of a genius. And still more issues has to be discussed and more issues has to be studied and researched, as a matter of fact. One of them, for example, just to give you two things which is happening very interesting, just to come to my role as a storyteller. I mean, first of all, they have to say in 1912 and later in 1917, he went to Damascus or to Syria, and he was able to be in part of these musicians and exposed to different kind of music, including church music and all these things. And still this thing needs more research and understanding of what was the impact of those tones and tunes and all these things in the musical instruments and singing and all these things. The other thing which is very related to Saad Zaghloul, by the way, and as you see, he put the music for Biladi Biladi, the song well-known national anthem, and Yunus al-Adi was the one who wrote the words. And as a matter of fact, after all these things happened in 1923, he was doing all these things and happy with all these events going on, and he trained the group to sing, and they sang it for the first time, Biladi Biladi at that time. And Saad Zaghloul was attending, and he said, "Who did the music?" And he was not, say, "Oh, where is the one who did it?" He said, "Darwish." And they say, "Oh, can I see it?" And Kamel Shinnawi wrote about this in details. He said, "He can see it?" He said, "No, sir, sorry, he died this morning." So the song that he still resonates with us, he died the same day that they put it on stage. And of course, one of the songs too is Ya Masri. Masri دايما بتناديك. I mean, wake up, or Egypt is calling you. By the way, Dr. Abulghar, he finished his articles every week with this sentence, Ya Masri, Masri دايما بتناديك. Egyptian cinema. This is the title, but I mean talking mainly about the movie Ben al-Asrain, which is based on Ben al-Asrain of Naguib Mahfouz. 1964 movie Ben al-Asrain was based on the novel Palace Walk, or Ben al-Asrain, by Naguib Mahfouz from the Cairo trilogy. Directed by Hassan Imam, and with the screenplay of Yusuf Gohar. The running time of this film is 128 minutes. It's almost an hour and 2 hours and something, 8 minutes. Its first cinematic screening was on March 2nd, 1964. But for most Egyptians, they watched and liked the movie because of its repeated screenings on Egyptian television, Film Arabi. And this is what I'm going to, why I'm mentioning that it was March 2nd, 1964, because, you know, most of the Egyptians, by the way, for generations, they didn't watch the movies in the movie theater, they watch it on TV later. I mean, that's why it's repeated, and in particular, Yusuf Shahin, Bab al-Hadid, and similar movies. Because when they were showing it, almost nobody was there. I mean, it's like, may stay 1 week or 2 weeks, and then after that, it was taken away and put in other movies. It is worth mentioning here, it is a black and white movie, the Ben al-Asrain. And by the way, just for, the sake of something I have to say, it's always I think about it. We say in English we say black and white movie. In Arabic always they said Abyad Weswed. White and black. I don't know why, but this is for years, this is the going on. It's interesting, maybe you don't want to say black first, maybe. And the movie settings of the events are very specific. It is 1919 in Cairo. And this movie is almost 12 minutes of scenes, especially at the end, recreating the 1919 revolution are the main components, I have to say it, are the main components of Egyptians' understanding and shared memory of 1919 revolution. It's a remade scene that for years became part of the cultural or national identity and DNA in the minds of the Ben al-Asrain 12 minutes, almost 12 minutes of the movie is about remade scenes of the revolution. It is worth mentioning here that the set and the costume designer of that film was Shadi Abdsalam. Shadi Abdsalam, just for your knowledge, is Victoria College graduate who studied theater in London and later made the well-known and critically acclaimed movie Al-Mumia, The Night of the Counting the Years, The Mumia, which was first shown in 1975. Why I'm saying Victoria College and why I'm saying studied in London? Because, sometimes people think that those who study in Victoria College or go to London or other places, they don't know how to react or interact with the people. It's not work. It's not always. Star Hussein was there. Tawfiq Hakim was there from Paris, both of them Paris. Mahmoud Mukhtar from Paris, they studied in Paris. And here we have Victoria College graduate and London Theatre School, Shadi Abdsalam. Now I will start to look at how these things are reflected somehow in 2019. First of all, I will read a piece, a description or analysis or criticism written by Galal Amin, recently published book, What Happened to the Culture or Cultural Life in Egypt. Let me say, quote him. What attracts my attention is that the period of 1914 to 1945 of Egypt culture history witnessed a giant leap, not just in literary and historical writings, but also in all aspects of the arts, theater, cinema, movie, music, songs, and sculpture. And you may notice, like me, Galal Amin is speaking, that in all these aspects, Egyptian intellectuals, as well as the artists, value and respect not only their heritage, but also the new tools in Western culture and the arts. And the outcome was works worth surviving, that it still amaze us with their beauty. And then he adds, Galal Amin, compare all this to what has been published more recently by a generation of educated people and university professors who have spent longer periods of time in the West than did the generation who studied in the West in the time period between the two wars, the two world wars. The new ones have earned more degrees than those who came before them. Yet, when they write, they are less creative, less impressive, weaker in language, further from logic, and less confident, leaning more to flattering even if what is said contradicts what is right and clear. In addition to that, we can see a decadence in education standards and the media's credibility. Quote by Galal Amin. Now I would like to suggest some questions and issues to be raised, because I always believe that there is a need for new questions, even if we think that most of our questions are answered. Now I would like to suggest some questions and issues to be raised. How and why have all these cultural components of 1919 survived over all these years? And do they help the Egyptians now to understand better their past and their present? And if yes, how can this better understanding shape a better future for creative artists and budding talents? Is it possible to see and live in depth the processes of learning and educating that were mentioned and achieved during those years following 1919? For those who care about culture and creativity in Egypt, will this revisiting, as I'm trying to do, of the past and this decoding, maybe it's a computer language now, decoding of 1919 be helpful in creating an atmosphere that enhances artistic work? What are the possibilities to gather and organize all this available data, knowledge and wisdom all together in one location, either a physical or an electronic space, to make the history and the heritage of this revolution accessible, searchable, researchable, and therefore inspiring for coming generations? How will scholars and researchers become able to find answers for new questions, to find more comprehensive approaches for those some puzzling aspects, rather than recycling what was there and repeatedly used and reused? And as I always reminded by people, and I'd like to remind you too, it is important to have history, but it's more important to have memory. Not a memory, and I will use somehow Egyptian mentality work, which fit in. But it's important, more important to have memory, not a mummified and petrified memory, but a living memory, agitating, energizing, and fueling the hearts, the minds, and the creativity of the current generation and generations to come. I will leave you now with these two quotations that struck me as appropriate to this review of the impact of 1919 revolution. Strength does not come from winning. Your struggles develop your strengths when you go through hardships and decide not to surrender. That is strength. Mahatma Gandhi. Another quote by Naguib Mahfouz: literature should be more revolutionary than revolutions themselves. Writers must find the means to continue to be critical of the negative elements in the socio-political reality. Naguib Mahfouz. Thank you.